Hello again, and thank you for listening to episode 1 of Reframing Asia, which was Resurrecting Identity in a Third Space. I now welcome you to episode 2, The Woman and the West. Now, as the title hints, I want to discuss the presence of women and how they lead their families in this novel. So, while I hinted at this a bit in the previous episode, we're going to delve into it a little bit more now. Now, as I mentioned earlier, women in the novel are often leading their families. For the sake of the scope of this podcast, I won't go into the details of every single female character, but even if we just look at Sunja for now and trace the others a bit, it's going to make sense. After the move to Japan and her husband's arrest, Sunja takes the lead in helping the family financially, much to her brother in law's dismay. Sunja makes a living by selling food, and this very literally becomes the source of the family's survival. On the other hand, we see some restrictions in Kyung-hee's character, which also represents a typical Asian family structure and the control of patriarchy, because in Kyung-hee's case, she limits her actions based on the reaction of her husband. In one part of the novel, Kyung-hee's dream was to own her own business selling kimchi and pickles at the covered market near Tsuruhashi Station, and when Sunja moved in, she finally had a person who'd listen to her plans. Yusuf disapproved of her working for money. He liked coming home to a rested and pretty housewife who had his supper ready. An ideal reason for a man to work hard, he believed. So, within their dynamic as well, Sunja continues to support Kyungi in her dreams, but Kyungi refuses to partake in anything that might upset her husband. Even in the scenes where she does help Sunja, with her business. She operates within a gray line where she accompanies Sunja but doesn't enter restaurants or workplaces themselves. And in these scenes, Sunja hears Kyungi talk about her dreams. It's not her place to say. All of this was what her brother in law would call foolish woman's talk. For Kyungi's sake, Sunja brightened up and linked arms with her sister in law, who seemed to drag a little. Like, there's numerous dialogues like these in the novel where it's either the narrator or Sunja reflecting on the way Kyung-hee thinks or lives, and it subtly or maybe not so subtly comments on the patriarchy within which she is subjected to stay in. Like, despite all of the restrictions that this family lives in because they're immigrants in Japan, the patriarchy adds another layer of control, specifically over the women or female characters in the novel. So MinJin Lee is representing both sides of an Asian woman's life. We see the side where women are controlled by their husbands, and then we see Sunja and her relationship with Isak, which is continuously nothing but support, both before and after his arrest. Isak is portrayed as a good Christian man. He marries a pregnant Sunja because otherwise she and her mother would lose status and respect in society for getting pregnant out of wedlock. He takes up Sunja's firstborn as his own son, and he also is engaging in political protests, and he gets arrested. Now, we also see Sunja's mother as an example of this more positive relationship with the man in her life, where her father, he showed nothing but love and respect for the both of them until he died. Now, after this, Sunja's mother starts running the guest house. She cooks and cleans and essentially runs the business from home, while Sunja is trained by her father to go to the markets and haggle for food. And there's numerous examples of characters and roles in the family, and it's also worth looking at Pachinko's integration of the Asian family into this novel, and the representation of a diaspora Asian family mingling the role of women in its narrative. The presence of religion really dominates the novel. It if we trace Isak's descent from north to south of Korea, where he eventually meets Sunja, converts her, and she marries him and promises to follow Christianity for life, we're going to start to understand the presence of religion in Asian culture and its impact on social structures, because family itself is quite central to this novel. It's a driving force, and it's what holds the essence of the novel together. And it's this persistence of family through generations of colonial and post colonial rule, through segregation of gender, race, and ethnicity and language. Within Asia itself, religion is extremely culturally diverse. You have Confucianism in China, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, and in other countries with Chinese populations as well, such as Singapore and Malaysia. You have Islam in Bangladesh, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Pakistan, Hinduism in India and Nepal, Buddhism in Bhutan, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand, Sri Lanka. There's numerous examples of varied types of religions. Christianity in the Philippines and Vietnam, and much more. And all these religions have different sects and belief systems within themselves, and they differ in practice culturally. But in each area, the concept of family is shaped by religion, and religion has been shaped by history. The countries Southeast and South Asia, with the exceptions of Thailand, Nepal, Afghanistan, and Bhutan, they were under the control of European colonial powers in the 19th and early 20th centuries, some from even earlier. So the imposition of foreign legal systems and the identification of certain modes of behavior as more modern influenced local customs and practices in relation to family matters. Though it met with considerable resistance, along with more general nationalist resistance to the colonial imposition of modernity itself, the colonial powers impacted everything, and family structures are a part of that. Kinship patterns and cultural diversity, they play a major part in the function and formation of family, and they vary significantly depending on historical migration patterns and the interchange with indigenous beliefs and customs. So there's no observation, no representation, no conclusion. It's absolute in of itself. In general, family sizes are smaller, they're less extended, they're more nuclear. Marriage is still overwhelmingly institutionalized but less prevalent. And patriarchal structures are very dominant. As we discuss Asian family and diasporas, no answer is generalizable, but each answer is a possibility. If we take this understanding of the Asian family back to Pachinko, we start to learn new things about the characters and the narratives. Drawing on previous discussions, Pachinko brings in the stories of the ordinary or normal man, sharing anecdotes, parts of history that those in power have erased or silenced, and at the same time, it shares these stories through the narratives of women who are part of a historically silenced group, both considering and apart from race. At several points in the novel, the line, "a woman's lot is to suffer," is repeated. In one scene, Young Jin says the woman's lot is to suffer, and Kyungi nods and repeats the word for suffering. All her life, Sunja had heard this sentiment from other women. They must suffer, suffer as a girl, suffer as a wife, suffer as a mother, die suffering. This word made her sick. Goseng. This word made her sick. What else was there besides this? She had suffered to create a better life for Noah, and yet it was not enough. So, with these circumstances, we can start to recognize or note more explicitly that it's women who have traditionally been given the center or a central role of carers and educators of children within the family unit. It's a role which offers them the opportunity to become the perfect vessel for the transmission of stories, to shape stories and tales in societies, and particularly within the dictates of a Confucian society. So the role of woman, it almost becomes like the center point of the transmission of memory as culture and inheritance. And you can elaborate on how the presence of women becomes an area of conflict since expectations require a woman to be subject to a man and bear his children, the layers to which we observe in Kyunghee's character. And also during the Meiji period in Japan, these expectations rose to those of taking care of the house, kids, parents, being educated, being well aware of economics, among numerous other subjects. So the house became a space in which a woman could locate a potential new power through the education of their children. They were in charge of the transmission of the family's past, and because of it, they had the opportunity to bury the secrets or relay them for future generations, which would then be maintaining and reinforcing certain ideas and events. This draws attention to gendered readings of war narratives, whether fictional or not. It can bring a deeper understanding between present and past, as well as a unique level of awareness towards the perception of women in certain societies and the ways in which memory is transferred between generations. So, Pachinko's position as an account of World War II from an East Asian female perspective becomes more important because it's bringing together two minority groups whose voices and stories have been silenced and separated from dominant historical perspectives of war and wartime. Femininity is then explored within the novel in the physical and psychological sphere, making the physical and spatial roles of women a central part of the narration. It's womanhood that becomes the thread that defines how the family is built and its opportunities for survival during the war. And this has the effect on the definition of each character's personality, fate, and role within that core group. You can take note of how memory functions within the novel as individual, cultural, and transgenerational. individual memory, it's almost haunting. One example of that is Sunja, where she constantly remembers Hansu throughout her life. He's present in her shadows, always watching what happens in her life, and also in the back of her mind. He is a prominent Yakuza figure. It enables him to help the family throughout the novel in maybe legal or illegal ways and reunite them when they get separated. And as she and her family welcome their grandson home, Hansu is a part of her life, helping her find out where their son ran off to and hid to, and this also serves as a constant reminder of their past. Cultural memory, it's prominent through the use of food, language, and clothes in the novel. Traditional food helps Sunja feed her family and ensure their survival. Language and ties to language at home serve as a reminder and a memory of home and where the kids belong to. It serves as a reminder of where they came from and the memories of their land lives through them. And lastly, transgenerational memory, the way I understood it, signifies the horror of the past, of the way immigrants everywhere suffered. Through storytelling and sharing memories from the past, all these forms of memories persist and pass on to Sunja's sons and grandsons. So living with such forms of memory also becomes a source of shame and secret for Sunja's son and grandson. Now we discussed this in the first episode. The very label of their Korean identity and the different parts of it is a sense of, it brings a sense of shame for them. The food, their skin, they have to go beyond the norm to hide their identity, an example of which is also the state imposed changing of surnames, where in the story the surname Beck becomes the Japanese Boku. Identity crises are forcefully imposed. Noah, Sunja's eldest, who is the secret child of Sunja and Hansu, faces an identity crisis on trying to fit in, to be educated and proper like Isak, who he believes is his real father, until later in the story where he discovers that that's not true. And this causes Noah to run away from home. For Noah, he tried his entire life to present the image of a perfect Korean because, as the novel notes, the Japanese think Koreans are filthy, but they have no choice but to live in squalor. Within such hostile environments, Noah tries his best to appear as civil as he can, because if he acts properly, he will advance in life, which he believes he does as he scores an admission into Waseda while working part-time and helping support his family. So this outlook on life is shattered when he finds out that his real father is Hansu, a yakuza. It causes him to run away, discard his entire past life, and start anew under the front of a Japanese man at a Japanese-owned pachinko parlor. The contrast also heightens the emphasis on identity when we note how Noah ran away from the pachinko business, which for Koreans living in Japan was one of the main sources of an occupation of earning, since Japanese would not hire Korean immigrants. These parlors also became associated with being Yakuza or Zainichi owned, and this turned into a persisting stereotype, and anyone associated with them became stigmatized. So, in colonial and post colonial Japan, pachinko parlors become a source of survival and earning for Koreans as a general population. And Noah spent his entire life at home trying to run away from the image of a Korean and assimilate into an image of a civilized, well educated Japanese man. Later on, he finds out that Hansu is his father, and he runs away from this. He begins working in a Japanese owned and run pachinko parlor under a disguise, and later he grows up and has a family of his own. And Sunja finally finds him in old age, and her discovery of him leads to him committing suicide. On the other hand, his younger brother Mozasu spent his youth running away from books and studying, happily went into apprenticeship at a pachinko parlor, a training which helped build his wealth in life. Both sons' lives are guided by memory and past. Noah launches into a denial of his past and belonging, while Mozasu uses it to build a life for his family. And while Noah always fixated on being a good student and a good representation of a Korean, Mozasu never cared for his reputation and never bothered looking good for the students or teachers at his school. Mozasu chooses to grow within his culture, while Noah works at a pachinko parlor out of a necessity and a rejection of his personal beliefs that he had built up over the course of his youth. So, in Sunja hiding Noah's lineage, his fate was predetermined to be doomed. Now, Isak helped her hide this by marrying her under good intentions, and the burial of the past betrayed Noah's fate in himself and who he thought he was, and the idea that he was never again able to return to this image of himself. He loses his personal identity, his individual memory. It becomes tainted, and his memory of being Korean or what it is to be Korean living in Japan for some reason it fails, and he fails to understand the meaning of belonging, either as an individual or in a community. Now, as the story progresses, we witness an interesting concoction of identity through Solomon. We see him progress through Western education and a corporate career. He meets a Korean immigrant, Phoebe, who completely rejects her Asian identity and the effects of war on her land and has adopted a fully westernized identity. All the way down to food and language, a revelation which shocks Sunja and Kyunghee when they learn that she did not grow up eating Korean food since her mother focused on her career instead of taking up child caring. On the other hand, Solomon carries the trauma and stories of war with him through storytelling and cultural practices and that he has picked up from his grandmother. It's a concept very different from what Noah adopted, since he carried his past with him as a shameful thing and hid it from everyone in his life. The struggles of a split identity will be something that Noah's children will never be aware of, because there is a part of their identity that is a complete secret to them, and it gets buried with Noah's death. Noah's loss of life is something that Sunja and Mosasu would always have to carry, since even his death can be attributed to Sunja discovering him. The "a woman's lot is to suffer" line comes up again. It becomes a sentiment repeatedly uttered in the narrative. It's a study of memory within the novel, which indicates that the work and the decision taken by the woman have not only been misunderstood in the patriarchal system, but they're also centered to a male centric narrative. Pachinko becomes a story of resilience in which the family's value and fate is associated with the feminine or the female capacity to navigate beyond the limits established by society, and by doing so, preserve alternate versions of individual and collective memory. Part of the suffering and persistence are the female bonds in the novel. The process of cooking showcases cultural bonds, it builds a sense of origin, and it allows the woman to bring the past forward with them. Even as Sunja supports her family as a widow, she takes up the role of a peddler, which later Kyungi and her mother help her with. However, Kyungi's role is limited to the control of her husband and his beliefs in sticking to gender roles. The female vulnerability is depicted within the patriarchal structure itself. We also see this in the relationship between Sunja and her two sons. This distinction between a good and a bad mother fluctuates between Sunja's ability to protect her sons from the secrets of her life. And because of these reasons, sometimes she's either marked by guilt of her first son's death or by the success of her second son. So, in terms of family, Sunja, or the female character, is constantly oscillating between life and death, for she will enjoy experiencing the growth of her family, but she will permanently mourn her husband, her son, and her past lover, and she will be haunted by their presence in her life or in the back of her mind throughout.